It shows that it's hard to write notes when she gets know what these things are, and I just want you to have heard of it and just have an idea. Thalassemia, the main thing is to know that it is hereditary, and it's very common in certain populations. So, and all this alpha, beta, blah, blah, blah. If you can look this up, if you've got somebody with thalassemia in your, if you've got a clinical patient or something, you can look it up here if you wanted to. And this is just where the picture came from, down here. But the deal here is that they're called target cells. Sometimes you may see that if you're doing if they're doing a microscopic examination of the blood, it will show target cells. And don't those look like bullseyes? Like this. They're not all target cells. You're seeing, okay, you've got that, but then you've got it in the middle. There's another target cell. That one looks like it's kind of halfway target cell. And there's another target cell, another target. So you see what I mean? If you got a small ring and then another ring and then the outside ring. So that's if you hear thalassemia, it is an inherited type of anemia that has bullseyes, the target cells. So that's really the main thing to remember about that. And those Mediterranean, Asian, African are more susceptible to those populations are. And the way that people are, our world's smaller now, and people are having children with people from other places and everything. And so we have in 211AB, we're going to see just a little video about somebody that has sickle cell trait and thalassemia. They're both hereditary, and so it's a kind of a strange combination. That's we'll talk about. So that's kind of like interesting. But we can have hemolysis of the red blood cells. Remember what hemolysis means?
Burst.
Yes. Burst is the right word. Bust sounds more emphatic. Okay, iron overload can happen when you're having lots of transfusions and the liver and the areas where you're going to do like iron stores can be damaged if there's so much hemolysis, and then you keep giving blood transfusions and those cells hemolyze, and so it can damage the liver. So, okay, an acquired hemolytic anemia. This one is all right. That's something that we talked about in mechanical trauma to the red blood cells. That can come from outside, or it can come from, well, just like if it's going through a mechanical heart valve or something like that, sometimes that can happen. But the mechanical trauma to the red blood cells, like we said yesterday, it can happen when you're drawing blood. If it's really difficult to get blood out and it's kind of having to jimmy it around, the needle jimmy it around, and if you're really pulling it out with the syringe real hard and the suction bursts them apart, that sort of thing. Autoimmune disorders can cause that. The hemolysis, bacteria can cause hemolysis, and especially protozoa infections can do that. And let's see, drugs and toxins and chemical agents and venoms, and we're going to talk more about that in 211AB, but the acquired anemias are that's one of those is the hemolytic. And again, the newborn babies we talked about that the other day too, that they on purpose destroy a lot of red blood cells because they don't need that many anymore because they're breathing on their own. They're not having to take the secondhand oxygen from the placenta that brings the oxygen to the baby. So. Anyway, so that's something where you can see jaundice and all, but that is a natural kind of hemolysis. But if their liver, especially at preemie, is not ready for that, they can really have a problem with jaundice. What we're going to do is that look for the manifestations according to what the cause of it is, and you want to treat the cause of it more so than just giving. You might have to give some transfusions, but that's not the only thing. You're going to
going to treat the cause. And do you notice when you're looking up your medications as to whether they can cause hemolytic anemia? So you may just have seen that before, but didn't exactly know what that was. So does that make sense to you what that is now? Then it can cause them to become fragile or worse. Okay. This one here, glucose 6-phosphate dehydrogenase, whatever. Anyway, that is African and Mediterranean descent that's passed through the X chromosome. So who passes it down then if it's the X chromosome? Yeah. But it's most common in African American males. And the female carriers don't usually have symptoms. They just pass it on to their offspring. So this one has something to do with glycolysis, like glycogen breaking down in the liver. Did y'all talk about that in metabolism at all? You probably did in anatomy and physiology too. That glycogen is stored up in the liver, and you can have but glycolysis is a good thing if you're having a low blood sugar, and that's what glucagon does. It makes the glycogen turn to sugar, and it can catch you up, and so you don't have to pass out necessarily. So that's a scary thing when your child has a reaction. It is just terrifying. Glucagon really does help tremendously. Okay, and in this particular one, it's in response to stressors. Is when you're going to have like an exacerbation of it. You can just be going along fine, and then when you have emotional stress or physical stress, we see that both in the hospital, don't we? We say, why is the blood sugar up? We can't figure out why, really, because they're not diagnosed with diabetes or anything, but it's stress, isn't it? And that's not really just a garbage can diagnosis or anything. That really is true. Stress does make a difference. And so the African and Mediterranean basin, where their heredity is anyway, and it has the high-risk areas for malaria. It says researchers have found evidence that the parasite that causes the disease doesn't survive well in G6PD deficient cells. So they believe that the deficiency may have developed as a protection against malaria. So that's kind of interesting. Yeah. But anyway, that is a hereditary thing. And I think in a lot of states they test babies for that to see if they have that hereditary defect, so that you can be watching for it and knowing what's going on. Okay, and aplastic. What's A mean? Or Ann? A or Ann? So it's just lacking or not, right? So you don't have. So anemia means either not much or hardly any blood, but of course this is really a shortage of blood, not an absence of it. But aplastic means that your bone marrow is not making them at all, or it's very, very little. So the bone marrow it's bone marrow failure, really. You have heart failure and liver failure and stuff like that. You can have bone marrow failure, and so that it affects all types of blood cells, not just red blood cells. They call it anemia, but the red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets, all of those things are at risk. You're going to have anemia, you're going to have neutropenia, and so that's going to make you be susceptible to what? Neutropenia? Infection. Yes, that's your first line of defense against infection is the neutropenia. And all the white blood cells have to do with neutropenia too. But, and then the thrombocytopenia, what you're going to have a risk for?
Bleeding.
Yeah. So you can have it congenital or acquired. Sometimes if you're exposed to some sort of like radiation source or chemical in the workplace, or maybe like chemotherapy or something for a cancer, you could have some bone marrow consequences too. So the symptoms are related to the degree of the bone marrow failure. We did have a patient that was a Catawba student. Gosh, this was years ago. It was like right when I started. I was probably 26 or something. But at the oncology office, he was just drop dead gorgeous, muscular, and tall, and handsome, and all this, and he was having some anemia, and just wondering what in the world was going on. And so they did a bone marrow aspiration and biopsy, and it was bone marrow failure. The only thing that they could do to cure it would be to do a bone marrow transplant. Well, he had the bone marrow transplant. That was pretty new back then. That they didn't have as many ways to sort of rescue people from that. But he ended up getting an infection and died. And it was like, oh my gosh, it was like 22 or something. And it really is very very sad. And it's more common though in older people. They're certainly more likely to have a bone marrow failure. I don't know what the cause was in his case. Just don't know. He could have been exposed to something that nobody really knew about. So anyway, with the congenital, the Fanconi anemia, you're always going to consider a bone marrow transplant or stem cell transplant. And the acquired could be from exposures and things like that. So you can try immunosuppressive therapy if it's something that the immune system is attacking the bone marrow. You can use the immunosuppressants. What would be an immunosuppressant? Yeah, steroids, exactly, because that's going to decrease the inflammation, but it's going to immunosuppress also. And then you could have some alkylating agents or something like that. We'll talk about that later with the cancer treatment. And then bone marrow transplant is an option there too. So, and so this is, again, this slide actually came from the maternal child book, because you can have that with children and adults. So you need to prepare the person to have lots of blood tests, administer and monitor transfusions, and provide periodic rest. Because we talked about fatigue yesterday, didn't we? That fatigue's a huge deal. Whatever reason the anemia is going on. And we want to have encourage food with a high iron content in most cases, and of course the screening for the anemia. We talked about cooking in the iron skillet. You can make gravy in it. You can make fried chicken in it. Whatever you want to cook in there. Not meth. We won't do that. I don't know how to cook meth. I love my soup, but I don't use it for meth. I use it to be able to think and everything when I've got a stuffy head. So, okay, anyway, I was seeing if you're okay. Okay, so the neonatal anemia can be from blood loss, of course, or the destruction or impaired production. We already talked about that, just like we would for an adult. So the blood group incompatibility, when you got an Rh negative mom and an Rh positive baby, it doesn't do anything for that first baby, but what happens if they have a second baby? What's happened in the meantime?
Built up antibodies.
Built up antibodies against the Rh positive, don't they? So if the next baby is Rh positive, then the mother's got antibodies to attack the baby. So what do they give? If y'all, I bet some of y'all know Rogan. Yeah. They used to let us do that because I did OB, but it was more observational and stuff. But we did give some Rogan in the postpartum if they weren't going to be nursing their baby, and so that they were Rh negative with their first child. So we were allowed to do that. So the big old IM. That's a good experience to get to do an IM in the big muscle. We normally just get to do flu shots and such. But okay. But anyway, the jaundice from the hemolysis of the peripherocytes is on this one too, and you'll learn more in 113, which is coming right on up, isn't it? This is going to be pretty quick. All right, so let me go to my YouTube here. What I want to do is, you see this is 5-minute one that is talking about treatment.
Splitting. disease treatment.
Chronic disease and iron deficiency anemia. Because really, these two diseases present very similarly. Both of them are going to have patients that present with signs and symptoms of anemia. So patients that are chronically fatigued and feeling weak, looking paler than usual, and maybe experiencing some shortness of breath. And really, when you go to draw the basic anemia labs, take a look at what's going on in the blood, you'll see that both of them are microcytic anemias. So really, the only way to tell these two diseases apart is to draw iron studies. So let's take a look at what some of those values would show. So here are some of the values that you get back when you draw iron studies. And we already went through this for iron deficiency anemia, but let's just do it again for practice sake. So with iron deficiency anemia, you'd expect your serum iron to be decreased, right? And hence the iron deficiency part of it all. The percent saturation, or the percentage of total binding sites on the transferrin molecules that are actually occupied by iron, would also be decreased. The total iron binding capacity in iron deficiency anemia is increased. And we said that that was the body's compensatory mechanism to deal with the deficiency in iron. So what the body does to deal with the shortage of iron is increase its production of transferrin molecules. It makes more transferrin, puts it out into the blood so that the transferrin can go out there and bind to more iron, to find more iron and bind to more of it. Okay? And ferritin, which is reflective of the amount of iron that's in storage in the body, is decreased in iron deficiency. Okay. So those are the values for iron deficiency anemia. Let's compare that with what you see in anemia of chronic disease. So just as an overview, once again, anemia of chronic disease is a disease where you have some underlying inflammatory condition. And as a result of it, you have an increased production of a molecule called hepcidin. And what hepcidin does is it, number one, decreases the absorption of iron from the gut. And it also decreases the recycling of iron from the breakdown of red blood cells. So really what your body is trying to accomplish in this disease is it's trying to limit how much iron is coming into the body, and at the same time, it's trying to tuck away as much iron as possible into storage, so that very little is present in your blood. In essence, the body is trying to play keep away with the iron away from bacteria and inflammatory cells because they really need it to thrive and to grow. Okay, so you'd expect that the serum iron in anemia of chronic disease would be decreased. That's exactly what the body.
Let's stop and kind of take that in. You know, we mentioned that they used to call it anemia of chronic disease. Well, that's what it says in the title. That's an anemia of chronic disease, but it really is anemia of chronic inflammation. Now let's put our phones down.
We can't see to write. We were trying to use our phones.
Oh, are you?
Like, can you like turn a little bit of light on?
Oh,
Cause
yeah, well, let me see.
like in the
It's just so hard to see. Yeah. Here.
will it bother y'all?
No.
Like,
Do that.
yeah, we can see. Yeah, we can see.
Okay. Sorry. So you can see, this is a little
Yeah.
bigger. I think it's a little bigger than the one that was yesterday. Well, anyway, so that the body's really trying to save the system, whatever, or the organ, and all that's inflamed from having extra iron, so it's to send it directly to the iron stores. Because if you have a lot of extra iron, then it's going to feed the bacteria or whatever is causing the inflammation. It's what the body is assuming, and that's why that they don't. You don't want to take iron. I think she's going to say this later, but sometimes iron supplements are not what you need because that can just feed the inflammation. Anyway, that's the deal there, and you don't have to remember the name of the hepcidin or anything like that, but know that there's a reason that the body's rejecting that iron for the bloodstream or making blood cells and just storing it so that you're not going to feed the infection or inflammation.
Body's trying to accomplish. It wants very little iron present in the blood. the percent saturation, which is again the percentage of transferrin binding sites that are actually filled up with iron, would also be decreased. The total iron binding capacity, or the amount of transferrin that's in the blood in anemia of chronic disease, is decreased. And again, this makes sense. It goes totally in line with what the body's trying to accomplish. It decreases the production of transferrin so that there's less transferrin out there in the blood trying to bind to iron. Okay? And finally, the ferritin, or which is reflective of the total amount of iron in storage in the body in anemia of chronic disease, is characteristically increased. And this is because, once again, the body has tucked away as much iron as possible into storage, okay, which is reflective of what you see with ferritin. So really, there are a couple of differences between iron deficiency anemia and anemia of chronic disease. Firstly, iron deficiency anemia is really a disease of total body depletion of iron. And these lab values reflect that very well, especially the ferritin. This tells you that there is no iron in the body, not even in storage, not in the blood, not in the storage, not anywhere. Anemia of chronic disease, however, isn't necessarily a disease where you have a depletion in iron. Instead, you'll see an increase in ferritin. So that tells you that there's iron in the body. It's just tucked away from the access of bacteria and inflammatory cells. Now, also, another difference between these two diseases is that in iron deficiency anemia, the body is doing its absolute best to increase the amount of iron available in the serum. And you see that with the total iron binding capacity. It increases the production of transferrin. It does its best to try to bring more iron into the body and into the blood. However, in anemia of chronic disease, the body is trying to accomplish the exact opposite. It's decreasing its production of transferrin so that you have as little iron as possible in the serum. And the increased ferritin also reflects that the body is trying to hide away its iron in storage. So, in summary, those are some of the differences between anemia of chronic disease and iron deficiency anemia, which again, you really rely on these iron studies to differentiate between, because they present very similarly. What's important to keep in mind is that these are both microcytic anemias. Because really, these two diseases present very similarly. Both of them are going to have patients that present with signs and symptoms of anemia. So patients that are...
Okay. Has anybody even seen iron binding capacity and ferritin and transferrin before? They do like a panel in hematology, because I work for an oncologist, but they do a lot of hematology as well, and so that's what they would be looking for. And at this particular point, that's more of like a kind of a specialty thing, but you can kind of see that the specialists are looking at certain things to tell whether it's being stored and whether it's not. So if you've got increased amount of ferritin, but yet you're anemic, that means you're storing it, and you don't need to be giving them an iron supplement, and that's really the main point of it. So realize that anemia of chronic disease, you may not get anywhere, and you really may actually cause damage to the liver and all those areas of storage where iron is stored. You continue to give iron, and it's not really iron deficiency. So, yes, ma'am.
Chronic anemia is something given to, and I might have missed this, but it's one of the given that allows the iron to release from the storage places. Is that because give iron pills because you have deficiency of iron, it's just stored, so they then give something that will release that iron.
You know, the videos that I've watched and all didn't really address that part. They probably do have doctors they've got loads on Academy, so they do have some more in-depth ones. But you know, I think you just have to kind of their body try to compensate to some degree, and some people don't seem to be that fatigued with that they have sort of chronic fatigue, but it's not like that it's all of a sudden. Most of it was like an activity tolerance issue, but yeah, I'm not sure that they can really do anything, and if it's chronic inflammation, if you can treat the cause of it, And that's what would cause that iron come out and everything. But if there's something different, that's what causes obviously loads of things cause it. So inflammation can be our friend. It's supposed to be something that aids our healing and all, and alerts the body that there's something, there's an invader and all. But when it goes out of whack, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that in immunity too, because I don't have all the answers there, but yeah, treating the cause is a big deal. Okay, so I want to go to Blackboard and see if everybody what we're doing here. I had feedback on 111 that people just did not want to do group work in class, and that you'd rather do content instead of doing something that you can do at home. So I gave you enough time to do it at home. So I do some of that. I don't do this usually classroom. So you can thank your peers. Anyway, they are really, really good. All right.
It's a quiz that gives us the grade. Is that okay? Got a little bit of a vision there. Okay, so this is our cellular regulation, and in one of the videos I'm going to show you this. It's Carl Sagan, and I have to admit that when I was a 20-year-old or something like that, I really thought that he was the devil and he was going straight to hell because he was an atheist or this kind of stuff. But I think, I don't know, when you label somebody like that, that's not always a good idea. But anyway, he really has when I saw that Contact movie, I could tell that there was a spark of spirit in him. So I don't think he's ready. But anyway, what he says is every cell is a triumph of natural selection, and we are each of us a multitude, and we're a multitude of cells, but we're also a multitude of viruses and bacteria and all this stuff in our microbiome. I don't think they even knew all of that when he was still living. So anyway, that's kind of an interesting thing that I've kind of changed my mind about him. I think he really does have some things to tell us. So, but it's interesting, and you don't have to believe it or whatever. It's a symphony of science to me. All right, so our cell, you know about this. It's our basic unit of life. It's the working unit of all living systems. How many of y'all had to do a biology project in high school and make a cell, a plant cell, or a model of a plant cell or an animal cell? Y'all have to do that? All three of my kids had to, so that was kind of cool. Their life starts as a single cell, you know that. We have trillions of cells, but we also have trillions of cells that are not part of our human cells. It's our microbiome. We got the nucleus, the organelles, all that kind of stuff. And we have the cells that perform specific functions. You remember, I think it was yesterday, or was it last week? I don't know. Anyway, the different kinds of cells that had all different kinds of shapes and sizes to perform the function that they were meant to perform. And then the body is normally supposed to regulate the reproduction and the proliferation of cells. And this is, when they are regulated properly, then things go well. But there's things that can get in the way. So our normal presentation, we got a cell membrane, our cytoplasm, nucleus nucleolus, ribosomes, endoplasmic reticulum, mitochondria, all those kind of things. This is just all to bring up all those things. Again, we're not testing you on this. This is just a little review to set the stage here. And then the DNA and the genes, and there's a lot
lots of genes with cellular regulation. So, we do have a protective covering to define the boundary and all that with our cell membrane. What I'm going to do, I highlight, I don't know if I did on y'all's copy or not, but I highlighted number 3. The brain of the cell is the what? The nucleus, right. It's a semi-permeable membrane. It's a double-walled membrane. And then our chromosomes are in there, and that contains the what? The DNA, and that's where our genes give us instructions for our inherited characteristics. And a nucleolus inside that makes RNA that makes the ribosomes, and then the centrosomes aid in the cell division. So, and then the endoplasmic reticulum, the ribosomes are in the endoplasmic reticulum, and they are in the cytoplasm, and they are made of RNA, and so they make enzymes and proteins to repair cells and to help the cells reproduce. And then I'm going to skip to number 9, which is the DNA and genes, of course, and all cells except the RBCs. We talked about that there's not a nucleus and there's not DNA in red blood cells, right? That was in our little film yesterday. So remember the AGTC, adenine and guanine and not tyramine. What is it? I just lost it. What's the T? Thymine, right. And cytosine, is that right? Okay, well anyway, that's not that big a deal. It's just that, yeah, that's where our AGTC, the letters and everything, are right by our elevator on the first floor. You've got that DNA ladder, don't you? The spindle. You notice that? And so that's pretty cool to have that in our building when you think about that's what's inside of us. And so you've got the sequences of the AGTC to instruct the cells in their functioning. So our genome is our total inheritance of our individual, and we have about 6 feet of DNA. Each cell has 6 feet of DNA. Can you believe that? I mean, how in the world it's so tiny? And then 23 pairs of chromosomes. So the 22 pairs are called autosomes. So what's the other pair? So that's our that's our XY, isn't it? It tells us where they're male or female. And have y'all been to the 46 restaurant? And it has on the bathroom doors it has XX and XY. So anyway, so that's supposed to tell you where you're supposed to go to the bathroom. So if people don't know that, they might get in trouble. So, all right. I think this is so beautiful. Isn't that nice? And that you can look at all of that and just remember here that here's our nucleus, the nucleus that's in there that you probably worked real hard to imitate making your cell and biology for that. So we sure did. We used like the gel stuff. What do you call it? Sure gel, and let that be the cytoplasm is kind of gel like. Okay. Normal cells. We have to understand what normal cells do to understand about the abnormal cells. So we have limited cell division, and so when we don't need more cells, there are signals to tell the cells to stop producing. Okay, so have y'all heard of apoptosis? Cell death? Yeah, programmed cell death, that's right. And I asked my son, I said that word or something, and he said, oh, I know all about that, it's the death of the cell and all this, and I'm like, how did you know that? Because he's a history major, and history and geology minor. So that's not, you don't do that in geology and stuff. But anyway, he said, oh, I learned it from a video game. It's like, okay. He learns all kinds of stuff from video games, but it was right. So, so the normal cells are mortal, and they have a limited lifespan. So, we have a small nucleus as opposed to the to the cytoplasm. You see the nucleus is not taken near all of the space. So there's more cytoplasm than the nucleus. And there is a specific differentiated function. Every cell has a specified purpose. So differentiation is a real important word for you to know and to understand, is that it means that the cell is doing what it was intended to do, what the body tells it to do, to be a nerve cell, to be a blood cell, be a skin cell, whatever, reproductive cell. And so there's tight adherence in the cells. They call it fibronectin. And there's another word that I've heard it called cadherin. I don't know. But anyway, fibronectin does help keep them together. Except for which kinds of cells? Like in tissue, cells are really kind of tightly connected. But what cells are not connected that we just talked about yesterday? Blood cells, they float around, don't they? And if they clump together, that's not good, is it? Now platelets can clump when they need to, when there's bleeding, right? They're supposed to clump there, but red blood cells are not supposed to clump. And so those are the ones that are the exception there. They're non-migratory except for the red blood cells, or the blood cells themselves. There's well-regulated growth. It's orderly. It goes in a certain progression. And there's contact inhibition. Oh, you remember when we were talking about disturbed energy fields? You know, you can use that for. Have y'all seen that on the NANDA? Disturbed energy field, like, get in my bubble. You know, so anyway, that's what the contact inhibition is. That they don't want to be too close. They're connected, but they're not. They don't want to squish each other. So, euploidy. What does EU mean? It's easy to hear eupnia and euphoria and all those kind of words. That means good, doesn't it? Or happy, or everything's going fine, easy. And then it's the opposite of DYS. So if you got dysphoria or dyspnea or dysesthesia, it's like a hurting in your fingers and toes, like a tingling that hurts too, like the neuropathy that diabetics get. So anyway, that means the ploidy means how many chromosomes that you have. So normally we've got how many pairs of chromosomes? 23 pairs. So we got 46 total then. So we've got 22 pairs of autosomes and then the 2 sex chromosomes. So autosomes are all the chromosomes that are not involved in the sex determination. So, and what are some body cells that do divide throughout the lifespan? They divide a lot. What happens when you have a sunburn? Yeah, epithelial. Mm-hmm. And what about? We talked about red blood cells taking they live about 120 days, and they take about 3 to 5 days to reproduce. But what did we say about neutrophils? Do you remember?
3 to 5 days.
And they really can they have a real short lifespan, and so they can reproduce really, really, really fast. But they have to be told to, though. You don't always, there is a big turnover to begin with, but if you've got an infection or something like that, then you rev up and make a whole bunch more. So those divide really, really fast. And what about like if you burn your tongue? So that's kind of like the same thing. Mucous membranes kind of go along with epithelial, don't they? So anyway, the normal cells in the GI tract, that's mucous membrane and stuff too. The whole GI tract, all the way, like nose, mouth, all the way down to the anus. Those cells can divide pretty rapidly as well. All right, so yeah. What's that? Oh, well, like your bone cells don't just break off and go into like maybe calcium comes out of the bones, but not the cell itself doesn't go into but the blood cells are the ones that do migrate. Okay, so we got mitosis and meiosis, and it's controlled by cyclins, and then the differentiation, we've already defined this. So we're making new cells, the somatic cells in the body, in the tissues. Meiosis is the reduction division in the sex cells, and so mitosis is what most of the cells do within the reproductive cells do the meiosis. And the cyclins just ensure that the cell progresses in the correct order of growth. And it's really pretty cool that there's some stops, and there's some hey, wait a minute, there's something wrong here. Like if you've got that ladder or the AGTC, if something's a little bit out of whack or out of order, then it's like a spell check on the computer, and you do have chemicals that will stop that and will mark the cell for destruction by the immune system. So that's when everything's going right. And all of us do have cancer cells in our body. We have mutated cells, but we don't have cancer if our immune cells are taking care of that. So that's really pretty awesome. Okay, and then the differentiation is that the cells have many cell cycle divisions, and after so many divisions, then they know what they're supposed to do, even though they came from a stem cell. There was like a pluripotent stem cell, not just a blood stem cell, but a pluripotent cell that could be anything in the whole body, and that's the really cool thing. So the normal cell division is just a balance between the cyclins that promote the division, and then the suppressor genes that limit the cell division. So we have, you heard the word suppression? Usually hear about that with somebody's being suppressed from doing something, or I don't know. It means it's getting in the way of anyway. So you're keeping it from happening. So suppressor genes limit the cell division, and so that if you had an injury or something, you definitely need to have cell division. But if you don't need that and you're just growing extra tissue, that's not necessarily a normal thing then. And it's supposed to be the need of the body, what does the body need, and those suppressor genes and cyclins do try to keep them in balance. So that's what we like to do. All right, this is an embryonic cell at about 5 days after conception. What do you see about that? So that's going to be the embryo. That's going to be a fetus. But what are you noticing there? They look all alike. I mean, they pretty much are. I mean, some of them are squished in the middle, and it's really 3D, so we can't see the 3D thing. But look at that. They've had some cell divisions, so haven't they? They got kind of squished in against each other. So the early embryonic cells, just after the fertilization and before the implantation, there's a whole lot of cell division, real rapid cell division, and continuous. It takes 2 to 8 hours for the cells to divide over those first 8 days before implantation. And so here these do not respond to signals for apoptosis. All they know what to do is to just divide. That's all they know how to do at this point. So that's the interesting thing. And they do have the anaplastic morphology, which means they're small and rounded, and there's no way to identify them. Like we have that biconcave red blood cell, and we saw that star-shaped nerve cell, and we saw skin cell and all this. So they were different looking, weren't they? They knew what they were supposed to do. So the nucleus is big, isn't it? It's taking out most of the cytoplasm. Look at that. And in our normal cell we saw a while ago, that was not the case. So there's no differentiated functions. There's not any. They don't know what they're supposed to do except divide. That's all. So they're not committed. So we call it totipotent, multipotent, or pluripotent. That means they have the power to to become anything once the signal comes. So loose adherence, they don't have fibrin. They're squished in there, but they're not really stuck together as tissue would be, like liver tissue or stomach tissue or whatever. That it's not adhered in that particular way, and they can migrate throughout the embryo. They're not stuck together, so they are migratory. They don't have the contact inhibition. Well, that's kind of bad news if they're squished in that little egg sac area. So anyway. Then the euploidy, they do have euploidy because they do have 23 chromosomes. So that's one of the things that is like a normal cell. And then they're eventually going to become committed about day 8. And the substance is called proto-oncogenes. That's what allowed the rapid growth. Like that turned on the rapid growth. And then they are just automatically just cut off. Somehow the switch is just flipped. We don't really know exactly how that happens, but it just flips. And the proto-oncogenes aren't active anymore, but the suppressor genes are activated now. And so they are turned on, or the genes are expressing by telling these cells what they're supposed to do. Each of those cells what they're supposed to do. Is that not the coolest thing? I just can't imagine that. I don't think this is explained like this in your book. Has anybody looked at that yet? I don't think it's explained about embryonic cells, is it? Because I think it came from one of the different books, but I just think that was the coolest way to explain this. This is the only time that normal cells, that this is normal embryonic cells, that they don't have control or that they don't have differentiation and know what to do. So that kind of relates us to what we're going to talk about with cancer in a little bit. But this is perfectly normal behavior in embryonic cells. So now, let's see. Okay, I've got my minutes on here. I'm not going to show you the whole miracle of life, but we're going to look at the cells and see. All right, so I've got lots of things here. There are some like abnormal growth that's not cancerous, because cancer is invasive. But these are not invasive, but they still can be dangerous. When you see the word hypertrophy and hyperplasia, what do you think of that maybe some of your patients have had? BPH. Y'all had some patients with BPH? Hypertrophy or hyperplasia. Okay, so this is set up with original tissue. Okay, so if this hypertrophy is increased in the size of the tissue, or it increases the size of the cell, so that increases the size of the tissue. And this is increased in the tissue size by putting more cells in there than you need. So those are the definitions there. So they are all under normal DNA control, though. It's not out of the control of the thing. Oh boy. Is it hyperplasia, hypertrophy? We just saw. All right. We've got neoplasia, dysplasia, anaplasia, and then the differences in the cellular regulation. There's a potential to become cancerous in the dysplasia and compromise the health of the patient. Even with hyperplasia and all that certainly can or hypertrophy. So number 2 is the metaplasia, and so it changes the differentiation pattern, and so it goes in the cell type is not normally found at that location in the body. They're normal cells, but they're not where they're supposed to be. So they are under normal DNA control, and it can be reversible. It usually is like from a some sort of a stressor like inflammation. And one of the best examples is endometriosis. We had a student, gosh, it's been probably 6 or 7 years ago now, but she had lung problems, and she was having a lot of breathing issues and everything, and it kind of was cyclic. But it ended up that there was endometrial tissue in her lung, and on there it can go to other places in the body. Of course, you think about that it's usually in the abdomen, but hers it landed in her lung. And then bless you. The third one, what does neo mean? New. So that's new growth. It's not needed for any development or repair or replacement or anything. It's just growing. And so neoplasm can be a mass of new tissue. You usually think of a neoplasm as a malignant tumor. It doesn't have to be a new mass of tissue. Okay, and number 4, the dysplasia. Has anybody heard that like on where I've seen it most was in like pap smears. You have a degree of dysplasia with a pap smear. And you can have like dysplastic moles too. Husband and my sons have had dysplastic moles removed. The real dark ones. They're not cancerous, but they could be on the way to becoming cancer. It doesn't necessarily mean that all dysplasia becomes cancer, but it's a possibility. So there is loss of DNA control with dysplasia, and so it's responding to adverse conditions by changing in that way. The DNA is not controlling anymore. So you can have varying size and shape and appearance from normal, and they're not doing the function that they should be. And it can be reversible, but you don't always know if you're going to be able to reverse it. So most of the time they cut it out of you if you got dysplasia. So 5 is anaplasia, and so it's like a regressive kind of thing. And it's definitely not differentiated. It doesn't have a function. It doesn't do any work at all. And it's not under the DNA control at all, for sure. And it is not reversible. So, like, you might be able to kill the cells, but you're not going to be able to reverse them back to a normal cell. So, there's no useful function, and they're just growing and growing and growing and causing damage and taking over the resources that your normal body functions need. So any of those alterations in cellular regulation can become cancerous or compromise the health, but the anaplasia is the point of no return as far as having that be reversible. All right, carcinoma in situ. So you've seen that before, probably in pap smear before too, and breast cancers. You can have it in other places too, but that's the most commonly, that's when I've seen it the most commonly in the oncology office. So here's our normal cells. Here's our hyperplasia. So we've got more cells than we need, but they're normal cells. Okay, now here's mild dysplasia. You see they're a little bit disorganized. I don't know if you can see that, but they're kind of getting now out of hand. Some of them are different sizes and all. All right, here's those green ones are severe dysplasia. They're and severe dysplasia is carcinoma in situ. So they've talked about that in prostate and breast cancer that whether you call it carcinoma in situ or do you just call it severe dysplasia and don't consider it a cancer. But no matter what, dysplasia is risky to keep it there. You do have to sometimes what they're doing is surveillance, a lot more surveillance on prostate cancer patients and breast cancer patients and just watching it. And then sometimes though the doctor will just discuss with the patient. We can just watch and wait, or we can do something about it. We can have surgery, we can do radiation or chemotherapy. They don't usually do chemotherapy, but they might do hormonal therapy or something like that. So that's one of those common that hasn't really been totally solved, but between the doctor and the patient is really kind of what's usually going on now. And then here we've got invasive, and that's the big difference between, you know, there's in some of those embryonic cells, we're doing exactly the same thing that we said that like malignant cells would do, but they're totally opposite. It's invasive. So invasive is the word. A benign tumor can cause, like if you've got it in your brain and your skull ain't going anywhere, is it? And so it's just going to squeeze on something, and it can certainly kill you. They can, benign brain tumors can kill you. Benign tumors in other areas can kill you if they're pressing on something that's really critical. But it's not going and spreading by the lymphatics or the blood like this would be, or going into other regions and creating their own blood supply and that sort of thing. So, but invasive is the word. Oh, I just said that without even reading it. I guess I've done this before. Okay. How do you like my crown? So cancer is uncontrolled growth and spread of the abnormal cells. So it can affect any body tissue. One place where you don't see it very often is, have you thought about where you don't see cancer there very often? I don't hear heart very, very often. You can like have a malignant effusion in the heart, in the myocard, pericard, and have some cells there, but you don't usually see the tumors within the heart tissue. I'm sure you can though. It's just it would be very rare. Oncology. What is ology?
Study of.
Yeah, it's a study of, and the ongo within is the cancer. All right. These figures are 2014, so there's probably some variance there, but heart disease is still the highest, and cancer is just beneath it, because the heart disease is becoming more and more treatable, and lots more options. Cancer, we still have lots of cancer deaths, but there are some medications that are coming out that can treat people to where they can live longer and live comfortably longer too. So that's really pretty close there. But anyway, let's see. This is the same one. I have an old one on my sheet. I can do difference with that. But anyway, so we got heart disease, and then cancer, and then the lower respiratory diseases, unintentional injuries, stroke, Alzheimer's, diabetes, influenza, pneumonia, kidney disease, and suicide. And the thing is that those numbers of suicide and the unintentional injuries and stuff like that can be, they're growing. And y'all heard those stats that the life expectancy is going down now, and especially in people that are not elderly. And so the suicide, and then especially the opioid problem, that some of them may be intending to injure themselves, but then, or kill themselves, but some people are not. Just like, I don't think Prince did it on purpose. We don't know, I guess, but he did it on purpose. Michael Jackson certainly didn't. The doctor just didn't monitor him right, did they? I mean, I took propofol when I had to do my colonoscopy. They were telling me, we're going to give you propofol, not Versed and Demerol. We're going to give you, because Versed makes you have amnesia, and then propofol, they get you to sleep just like this. I can't snap my finger. My fingers are too dry. Snap anyway. I'll just say snap. But then you wake up like that too, and you can remember everything. And that was really weird, because I had Versed twice. I've had 2 colonoscopies before, and this propofol thing was, it was wonderful. It really was. You just got your stuff done, and then you just get up and go, and you can remember everything. Yes, ma'am. No. The point is that the cancer's the second cause of death in the United States, and heart disease is the first. And that's really the point. Yeah. So anyway, those things are sort of taking over some of those stats from cancer because people are dying young. So yeah, that's all you need to take from that. It's really an example. All right. And so this is the estimated new cancer cases in the U.S. for 2016. And so the males and the females, and it's not necessarily exactly the same, but pretty close, 841 and 843,000. But what we need to note here is it excludes the basal cell and squamous cell skin cancers and in situ carcinoma, except for urinary bladder. So that's kind of complicated, but mainly the most frequent cancer that's detected is basal cell skin cancer because people have the sunshine exposure and all that. We're going to have skin cancer as one of our exemplars in 2011. So, okay. So for males, your estimated new cancer cases, because based on the previous years and the trends, is that males are going to have the highest incidence is going to be prostate. And lung and bronchus is next, and then for the women, it's breast, lung and bronchus, and then colon and rectum. So that's kind of easy, isn't it? You've got your hormonal-related cancers for both the men and the women. The colon and rectum is the third for both men and women, and second is lung and bronchus for men and women. So this is one of the things I was telling somebody a while ago that, okay, this is a question that I promised you will be on the test. So write this down. The estimated new cancer cases, or the incidence of cancer cases in males, is going to be, you need to know number 1, number 2, and number 3 in order. So put it down for males. Prostate, lung and bronchus, colon and rectum. Do 1, 2, 3, and memorize that. Because that really is, that tells you that you're going to see more of those things in your nursing career. You're going to see more of that with cancer patients. And you may be working in cardiac, or you may be in the ER, or whatever, but people are going to be showing up with those things, whatever other baggage they've got too. They're going to have incidence of prostate, lung and bronchus, and colon and rectum. Same thing for the women now. You're going to do breast, lung and bronchus, colon and rectum. That's the highest incidence level, or how many cases that you expect to have that year. So y'all got that? So the hormonal related ones are first, lung and bronchus, colon and rectum. All right. So let's see if there's anything. Let's see where I can see a couple of things that I put on here. Cancer of the prostate and breast will be most frequently diagnosed cancers in men and women, respectively. This is directly from the American Cancer Society. It's followed by the lung and the colorectal in both men and women. Okay, lung cancer is by far the most common fatal cancer in men, followed by prostate, colon, rectum. Now, I think we have another picture too, though. So I think I'll probably just use the picture to show you what you can see on this one. They changed the picture one year, and I just didn't redo my slide because it really says the same thing. All right. So cancer deaths in the U.S. in 2016 is what you would estimate it to be. So that's going to be question 2. So y'all can have, it may not be quite 4 points because I think our test is going to have like 65 more questions because we're merging them with that other unit. We have 50 questions, in that which would include the math on the cancer, the cellular part, and then I think this Chandler's going to do 15 questions on the psychosocial, and then the legal part will be just on the exam. It won't be on this particular test, so that might help a little bit. Okay, so lung and bronchus, though, is the top killer for both, right? Prostate, hormonal cancers of prostate and breast are the second killer for men and women, and then the colon rectum is the third cancer killer. So So you just have to flip that. Take the number 2 lung and bronchus, so the deaths are more lung and bronchus, but then there are the second death cause is the prostate breast. Anyway, so yes, that will be, if you know that, you will have 2 correct questions. And I know that sounds like that's just a knowledge question and all that, but the reason I felt that it was so important is we used to be certified as a oncology certified nurse. I have OCM after my name, my alphabet soup there, and it's oncology certified nurse. We used to have to take a test every 4 years, so I had to take the test 3 times, and then they started doing it with continuing and professional development and all. But that was they always had us to we had to know, and that was something that they asked us on that test. And so I feel like, well, if you have to know that for that test, that's very important. So anyway, and I think for a generalist nurse that's important just to do those topics. Okay. And this is like the lifetime probability of developing cancer. This is kind of just to get a picture of this, is all sites 1 and 2. This is males. Prostate 1 and 7. And that you don't have to memorize any of that, except you're seeing the prostate, lung, and bronchus, colon, rectum right there. That's telling you the top 3. If that is the lifetime of developing cancer too, isn't it? So you don't have to, I'm not giving you a question on that one, but that it does show you that it carries through for the whole lifetime. And there we go. So here we go, breast, lung, and bronchus, and colon, and rectum. So that's our, but like the incidence and the lifetime probability is the same thing as well there. So, it says the risk of an American man developing cancer over his lifetime is the 1 or 2. The leading cancer sites are prostate and So this is survival rates. And this is really a FYI thing to know. We're not going to go so this tremendously, but we're having lots more deaths from pancreatic cancer than we did in 1975 to 1977. It's more than double from 1975 to 77. So you've seen a lot. People have, you probably know people that have died of pancreatic cancer or have pancreatic cancer. You're seeing that more. And melanoma of the skin is rising. So this is just sort of a trend thing that you can look up. The colorectum might be a dietary thing. The relative cancer survival rates. Well, no, wait, no, this is survival rate. That's not incidence thing. I'm sorry. This is good because you're doing more. You're having longer survival, but that doesn't mean that you're not going to die. Sorry, I did that wrong. That's the whole thing we were doing on our exam was to make sure that you had a look at the charts. Well, there we have the charts. So, okay. And then by race, it's a whole different deal though. Look, the survival rates are less in the black females, and for the colorectum and the esophagus, all of those rates. Now, prostate is about the same. But all the other ones some of those are pretty dramatic, aren't they? The African Americans are not surviving as well. And what happens is, what I had highlighted on my sheet is that you need to know that African American men are more likely to develop prostate cancer than men of any other ethnic or racial group. So they're more likely to develop it. It may be a hereditary thing. It might be a poverty thing. We don't really know exactly why, but it is related to hormones to some degree. So I don't think we really know why exactly, or access to care. That may be part of it as well. Okay. Let's see if we can get it. Okay. Okay, I had written down a couple of other things. Know that African American women have less incidence of breast cancer than white women, but they're about 28% more likely to die from it. So the white women have more cases of breast cancer, but more a greater percentage of the black women die from it. So some of the stuff that I wrote down here was some of the old statistics, and I replaced some of those last year. So I think that looking at the charts will tell you more than what. Yes.
What did you say about the African American women?
Oh, is more likely to develop prostate cancer. It's like, and that the African American women are less likely to get breast cancer, but they're more likely to die. Hopefully we get that changed to bitch. Okay, let's take a 10-minute break.